Church tower.
Yeah, so welcome Kseniia and Nando.
Hello. Thank you. All right, thanks everybody for coming today, and thank you, Tanya, for putting this together, and Oakslab for setting it up here. Thanks everybody. All right, so let's start facing some things here. So it was a Monday morning, and I had my usual check-in with my PM, and I was about to start telling him about, which things I had to do on my prototype that I was doing in Figma, and all that stuff. And he said, "Hold on a second, let me show you something." These are words sometimes you don't want to hear. And he showed me something. What he showed me was a full-fledged, prototype that was basically all of the designs that I had done, basically clickable, all interactive. Sure, it was busy, it was generic, right, looking, but it was a tangible thing. It was a full-on prototype, it was clickable, you could go through the whole thing. He said, "Yeah, I spent my whole Sunday doing this, and it's just kind of a experiment, and I just kind of put it together with Cursor, Lovable." And I was kind of like, wow, mixed emotions. In one hand, I was amazing. I was so happy to see this, that I had tried to do this before, and we had troubles with that. And he just put it together from my static wireframes. Actually, yeah, that's why I was very grateful to see that he actually put it together, because he kind of got me over this, this bump that I was having trouble with the first time I tried to do that. And I felt a bit of total existential dread, stuff that happens from time to time. And I thanked him sincerely, but I couldn't brush off the question in my mind, which is, will we be replaced by AI? Now, I'll just start telling you that it's not that kind of talk. I don't know. No one here knows. I know that for sure. There's people way more competent at this than me who also don't know. And, I think it's kind of pointless. I mean, sure, there's a lot of things we can try to predict about the future, but at the end of the day, things are happening at such a pace. So that's not what we're going to do here. I'm going to be talking about the present. And so, in the present, I have some kind of good news for you. And the good news is, you haven't been replaced yet. And I know that this is a serious topic for a lot of people. I know a lot of our friends have, been replaced in companies, and I'm not saying that that's not happening. I'm just saying that that's not actually the time, and we cannot actually be fully replaced by a machine, by an AI as it stands today, okay? And I'm gonna be talking about this a bit in this talk. And sure, AI can do a lot of things faster and maybe better than you, but at the end of the day, it can't do the whole design process for a feature, for a product, without any good human guidance. And so, there's been companies that tried this and already went backwards, so these are just some cases, but at the end of the day, I think it's pretty clear that, there are certain things that humans do that are required for a successful design to happen. And, so some of the features that we have that are really important for design that agents still don't have is empathy, so true empathy, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, emotional intelligence, critical thinking, strategic judgment, cultural context, and reading between the lines, which I think kind of sums up the whole thing. And I think we all had the experience by now of telling an AI to do a full thing and realizing that it may do it, but it's not the interpretation kind of varies, right? And the point is we kind of we are actually able to do things that the machine can't do without us because we're able to read between the lines. Oh, but yeah, just before you get too comfortable, remember we have a problem. You can still be replaced by another human who does AI better than you. And there's a lot of those people out there, so let's be real. And so let's step back a second, and I wanted to talk about like what makes it hard for us. Why is it such a difficult thing for us to kind of accomplish, and a lot of people have trouble with? Like, one of the things that I noticed, and I feel like something that happened that's pretty big, is we had a paradigm shift on the types of tools, the way that tools work. We are used to, I think at this point, everybody grew up with specialized tools, and those people who were born maybe a year or two ago are probably not professional designers yet, but with AI maybe soon. So the tools were specialized, one tool does one thing, or a couple of things. And we went to generalist tools where all the tools do all the things. So obviously I mean things like, Word does text, Photoshop does photos. And now we have a bunch of tools that do very similar things or completely different things and overlapping, and it's just like, even Miro now has prototypes, which anything goes, right? And so, yeah, and there's a bunch of tools, and I think the overwhelm is something that we are all used to by now, but so everybody's overwhelmed. There's a tool overload. There's a chatter overload. People talking about the discourse is crazy about like how you're outdated, how your skills are outdated. And it's hard to compete with the super intelligence. And at the end of the day, many of us end up asking, doesn't AI first sound a little wrong? And by that, what I mean is that, doesn't it sound like you're saying the goal of it is AI? And aren't we trying to use AI to do something else? Does it sound like the wrong goal? And I would say yes, it kind of does, and it kind of did for me too, but the point is if our job is to create intuitive experiences based on user insights, I love this thing, by the way, I don't know if you saw it, Figma posted this on Twitter the other day. So yeah, this is our job, right? We are supposed to be doing great experiences, making things intuitive. So let's talk about when that works and doesn't work at this age.
Yeah, so AI first. Well, what do we mean by that? So everyone are talking about AI. AI including every process, every step, every way around. We try to somehow build it in every hour step. But it's everyone are overwhelmed with as mentioned, tool pressure, also the anxiety, overwhelm us, all the news going on that you have to be efficient, you have to be better, you have to be fast and such, and you kind of now stick to kind of skipping the steps. For example, hey, wireframes, I don't need it anymore. You can just you're a designer, just go into code, go and prototype. It's going to be much faster, blah blah blah. But is it really the case? So because on every step we expect AI to deliver the whole product, but as a designers, it's not the way how we work. It's not the way how we think about stuff. We just when we're starting on the task, we're never starting from okay, I have to build an app. We're starting from the actual problem, actual needs we're gonna face, and why we don't have the same approach with AI. Because what we expect from AI is just go and hey, build this whole stuff for me. But you don't provide us enough context for AI, you don't provide the whole process for AI, and when you can't do that, how you can expect AI just to figure out all this stuff for you? So, yeah, why just not to use the skills that we already have, and then try to leverage AI there? So, in design, in our opinion, AI first, it should be still design first with some AI tweaks. What we mean by that is still approaching any problem from the problem-solving perspective, from understanding the users, understanding the needs, understanding what you're trying to achieve, what are your goals for that. And only once you get this base, get of understanding what where you're trying to get, only after that trying to see where AI can actually speed up this process. And not just expect it to build the whole thing for you, but to understand where it can be efficient in smaller steps. So yes, there are some steps where AI really helps. There are some steps where AI just brings more problems and overwhelm you with all the stuff it produces. And well, the trick is basically know where to use what and how.
And so I'll go back to that where I started with the presentation and just talking about the prototype It's a fake brand, by the way, just it's AI generated, as you can see. But yeah, so going back to that prototype, remember I said that I was like, at first I had tried and I gave up, and then my PM came back later with his version. So when we had our first client meetings, like right after the first meetings, I went into Lovable. We were all kind of excited to try it out, and we built some prototype. And basically, this was the first version of it. And so this prototype kind of has everything that we needed to kind of start the conversation. So it's kind of mind-blowing because the amount of time it took to put this together was just nothing. And it actually allowed us to have certain conversations with our stakeholders, which were super valuable because we got them to see something and be talking about what they wanted, what they didn't want, and put it in the context of what they wanted. So that was super valuable, right? So the next step was like, let's go back and keep improving it. So you can see I did some changes there. I changed some panels and, you know, ooh, this looks a little nicer, right? So I talked to them about this as well, right? So all of this generated a lot of conversations. However, like, I kept going back and I kept going back. And there's a moment where it's almost like this diminishing returns thing, right? So there's a point at which, like, going back to Lovable and telling it, hey, change this, change that, there's a point where you just start to kind of get to a certain amount of stuff to deal with that gets very overwhelming. It was costing me time, and it was costing me my nerves, and I kind of hit a wall. And that's when I learned that, cleaning up AI mess is, you know, it's a lot of work. So what do you do with that? Well, that's when we go back to Figma. So at that point, you know, and I'm not saying this is some universal solution. I'm just telling you in the case of this situation, you know, I went back to Figma, and that really helped me, and I tried to kind of stick to what I know to do fast, which is let's put the code on hold and let's move this conversation back to a place where I can actually resolve some of the problems that I was having, resolve the layout, resolve the specific widgets, all the placement of things. So I kept doing that, and you know. So I'll come back to this in a bit, but basically the moral of the story is this. We tried it, it helped, then it stopped helping, then we remembered what the hell we were doing in the first place, and then we shifted.
So basically, to sum it up, what we wanted to say here is like, we like in any way don't want to say hey, you don't use AI tools, they're useless, prototype, and it's not the case, blah blah blah. Like, we don't know, it's like a way to try stuff, and it's obviously brings some value. And like, yes, we have to be open-minded about the AI tools we use. Just like define the exact moment where it could be useful. Also, like, be humble about like where to use it and how, because yes, there are some tasks where AI could be better than you. And like, try and find these tasks and these spots is actually what brings a lot of value to your working process as well. But also sometimes be smart about just stopping for a moment, stepping back, and seeing if you're like actually aiming towards what you wanted to achieve. And sometimes it's actually like a right moment to just like understand, okay, this is my maximum, this is anything it could give me. Everything from this point is just going to complicate stuff.
And remember to revisit, because the tools keep changing very fast, so don't just give up on a tool completely. There's a time when you have to just kind of try it again later. Now let's talk about partnership. Where's the coach? Can you? So, when you think about AI, it's important to kind of consider the role that you want it to play, right? So sometimes it can replace, sometimes it can enhance. Let's say the automation is whatever AI can do better without any supervision. So it's something that you just kind of, without supervision. And I'll get back to that in a second. And augmentation is what you can do better assisted by AI. So let's talk about automation. So automation, it's best when you have repetitive, well-defined tasks with clear success criteria, right? So it's the grunt work. High volume data processing, and situations where like speed, consistency matter more than nuance. Like, so for example, content moderation is one, data entry, you have a lot of data to enter, generating a bunch of assets for you that are just kind of, put the information on one side and get something the other end. Writing a bunch of filler placeholder that actually is contextualized to what you're doing. So yeah, it's great for efficiency, but it's not a good nuanced thing. Whereas augmentation, this is when you need that like complex reasoning. This is when you need creativity, you need judgment, and these are like high stakes decisions, right? So you need that human oversight, this is where like collaborating with the AI actually gives you a lot of sort of analysis and suggestions and a lot of power, but you need to be there to give it the strategic direction. You need to be there to like orchestrate the thing. So some of the examples of this are like, I think these are all pretty clear to everybody who works in design, but like, user research analysis, insight generation. So you can skip a lot of hours of processing interviews and sessions if you get the AI to actually do that for you. Like I have something like 40 plus hours here of manual coding, but then, you can get a bunch of insights, but you have to decide what to do with it. It's not something you can just kind of get and put it out there because there's going to be nuances. Same thing for accessibility, right? Like with AI, you can save yourself a lot of trouble finding those little things that are off, but like a person is the best to actually spot those accessibility problems because you are more able to connect with the people who have the disabilities. But you also, with the AI, you can get insights that you couldn't get just from your, point of view and your bias. And rapid prototyping, user flow validation, which again, making my little prototype is something I learned, but also for validation, like you can do simulations, you can try to get the AI to help them. There are tools that are doing that. But at the end of the day, again, it depends a lot on your context and your experience, what you do with it, whether it succeeds or not. And actually, sometimes we're trying to automate things that should be augmented. So that's one of the problems that happens when people are just like, expecting that you can just make a full app or a full website and think that that's going to be like the thing that they expect it to be without any supervision.
Yeah, and so we had like an actual example of that because we kind of tried out in Oxford. And it was just like a small POC that we wanted to build for our clients to prove some of our concepts, to prove like how we can leverage the design development process, how we can include AI there, how we can speed up the things. And it also was kind of experiment for us, like what we can actually achieve, what we can, because it was kind of a safe space, it was a smaller project, just like a one core flow of the platform, and we can basically play around with this and quite a lot. And obviously, like the first thing that comes to your mind as a designer, like trying to leverage AI in production, just like go and do the code, right? Like because it's like the most obvious stuff. Or like, hey, I have in mind my like how the screen gonna look like. Please do me the screen, which is like, as we already understood, not really the case. And then developer gonna hate you for that, with like dealing with all this code and bugs and such. Or like some ideal case of thing is like, right, I have some design system put up in the Figma, like imagine even having like some default chassis and already works because it's like probably now it's like the blasted trend and everywhere. But like, and once I have the design system, like ideal case scenario, right, like I'm gonna go to AI, like Figma make whatever, and say like, hey, I have all these components, just do the screens for me. Or like, hey, I actually have like in mind how it should work, like, please do the component, document all the properly. But it just doesn't work like that. It just not, and probably it will be in a few years, but you're not in this stage yet. So we kind of instead try to discover some probably like a smaller steps that we can take, but like something that could be really efficient and usable into like actual workflows. So it was like quite a interesting experience from the design side as well. And basically, as we discussed, there are two approaches, right? So first we thought like what we can actually automate, where we don't need human to curate that much, or what could be like this first iteration of that. And like example being is just you have some component in Figma. You just like I ask through like either Code Connect or connect cursor through MCP to Figma, so it's like pretty precise to just like basically do the code for you or like for developer. And yes, it's not like super ready, it's not production ready, but it's still, instead of like spending 2 hours doing the whole code from scratch, it gives like a nice solid base anyway. So this example of automation that actually works, and I think it could be used like in further productions even. But it's obvious like you can't do everything like that. You can't just like go to AI and say like, hey, just like, do this stuff for me. And there, of course, should be like some augmentations. And for this, in the design, like doing some kind of like trying to get closer to production was for me is that obviously like we've been using Kseniia. I'm not sure if anyone ever heard of Kseniia, but it's like currently kind of like a trend design kind of system, like UI kit mostly, because it's pretty small. But it's also like based on this, it's so simple, and based on this you can build like basically whatever on top. So it's like pretty used across all this like current AI like V0, Lovable and such. But like the issue is it doesn't have all the components you need. And once you like a really experienced designer who like saw hundreds of apps in your life, probably it's pretty easy for you to just like go and design some components and like some patterns. For me, it wasn't that simple, and instead of just like, and I had to just like go through all possible like apps trying to find the one component that I needed, and I had to build from scratch. And I spent like hours on this because some of them like not really included all the features I needed. Some of them just like looked weird, they behaved weird. And at some point I just like gave up. I was like, whatever, like let's try out AI because everyone is talking about it, right? So I just like went to AI and said like, hey, please design this component for me. And it did something. It wasn't perfect, but with this, it's much easier for you as a designer to identify why it doesn't work. Because on like actual like platforms, they usually either like some screenshots, so you can't really click through, or it's just like you have to go through so much. But with AI, like it's much easier because it gives you the base. And you can also, instead of you trying to figure out it from scratch, trying to prototype it, then identify like, okay, it actually doesn't work, or okay, it actually doesn't cover something. You can just prompt it to AI, and it takes you like 5 minutes, which is like already a lot. So what I want to kind of sum it up like is that there are ways actually in the now design and development process where you can use AI. But you always have to understand what you're trying to achieve with that first, and also not go all into the automate because it's just not going to work this way, at least currently, and you have to be anyway creative of the process. But like once you're understanding this is like not the approach that's going to work, it's much easier for you then to set like realistic goals and understand how you want to communicate it to AI.
This also goes into the title of this, which is partnership, and I think this is also a great tool for partnership with your devs because you're kind of co-creating at this point also by using the libraries together and developing together basically. To sum it up, I guess the idea is this: designer augmented by AI produces more innovative solutions than either could do alone, and I think that's kind of the gist of this. Always try to be strategic. Bring intent, find the spots where your brain should be. I think that's the hardest part in all of our workflows, not only designers. And, from that place, you orchestrate. Prompt better and prompting better means being more specific with your requirements and intents. And sometimes, again, you will go to an AI and LLM and ask for help to prompt better. But the more you know exactly what you're looking for, the better results you're going to get. And yeah, another thing that helped me a lot in the last year of coping with all the changes is that earlier this year a friend of mine told me to watch Karpati's deep dive video. I don't know, has anybody seen this video? Like, this guy is kind of a big, yeah, you've seen it. So this guy's like I forget now what's his background because I'm an idiot, but he's a big deal, right? Like he used to work for what?
Yeah, he's one of the founders of OpenAI.
Yeah, he's one of the founders, exactly. So he made this whole video on YouTube. It's super worth watching for anyone. And what it helped me was to kind of understand a bit how the LLMs work and what they are and what they're not. And I think in general, when I'm working with any AI tool, it helps me to kind of have that mindset.
Let's probably jump into kind of last topic we want to cover today, which is, so we've been talking about like how to use AI into prototyping, into this like developers process, how to bridge this gap and such, or like how to make this AI do your design job and on all this stuff. But like where it actually wasn't covered and where I think the AI's shine is actually the communication. But what do we mean by communication? Well, this is kind of like the product life cycle that like all of us are aware of, right? So like there's design stage, there's development stage, there's release, blah, 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 blah. And there are obviously like some steps in each of these processes. And so far, what we've been talking about is like mostly covering how we can leverage AI in every this like certain smaller life cycle. But probably what we want to talk about and what we mean by communication is actually this. And this is where AI just shines, because it's not obviously only like some design developer handoff. There are like much more steps into it, which is could be exploration, which is could be some ideation, some stakeholder management, and or even like project onboarding. Like imagine instead of just chasing your PM and asking 5 million questions, hey, what is it's all about, what do we have, blah blah blah, having just like one AI space where you can talk to, where you can ask all the questions, where you can even like explore some stuff. It's already spinning up instead of like 1 week of onboarding, 2 people involved in that at least. It's just you and a machine for like 2-hour chatting basically. Or it also could be like stakeholder communication, right? Because as a designer, for us, it's like always the issue that like you visualize something, you have like some specification, you kind of outline on like what you want to build, blah blah blah, what you want to achieve. And then you come and present it to stakeholders, and then they're like, well, actually like envision this a bit differently, blah blah blah. And AI then it's actually such an amazing tool for people who are not in your field to talk with you the same language. It could be not only about the design work, but like even engineers, right? So like, hey, I can actually now go and code. Yes, it's not going to be perfect, but at least they would get like, at least I speak their language at this point. And this is what we mean by communication, and this is where we think AI is a bit of underrated, why people usually don't think this way when they like go into these fields to use AI into these processes.
That's the idea. Talk is cheap. Outputs are cheaper. So nowadays anybody can generate anything, which pretty much anything. You can make videos, you can make audio, you can make text, right? Anything. So you don't have to have the expertise, and you can actually generate anything. But it's, you know, so that's actually, as Kseniia said, it's great for communicating to people in their own language. I think it's great that there are no boundaries. Like, I truly do. I've always been a proponent of people kind of stepping outside of what their expertise is to try to communicate something. And, you know, like she said, sometimes it's easier to make your point if you have the thing running in front of you and you don't have to ask permission to anyone to do this demonstration. On the flip side, you can make stuff like this. Everybody can. AI can also be bad for communication. And what I mean by that is that, you know, the problem is when people have the wrong expectations of what they're seeing. And like, let's say your stakeholder makes a whole app, full-fledged, brings it to you. And to their mind, because that thing looks so final, it really looks like the app is finished and it's ready. And they come to you and they say, do this, it's perfect. And you're going to argue with somebody who's convinced that the thing is ready. So that's dangerous, right? Because the framing is wrong. What I also like, if you, for example, bring something fully finished to a stakeholder meeting, you might end up getting a ton of feedback on things which were not supposed to be there in the first place or that you knew were broken. So it's a little bit like you get a lot more done quickly and maybe with this, you know, outside your expertise. But on the other hand, this is the problem. Like over something like a wireframe where you're actually yourself making everything step by step. So outputs are cheap, but they can trick you. They can be an illusion. And they can hide serious problems. Listen to this guy. So I would say vibe coding is a great example of where this happens, where people don't understand, like, if you don't understand that you lack a certain expertise, it's very hard for you to know that you don't have that expertise. So, right, so basically when people are vibe coding a ton of apps out there and putting in, and selling them and finding out later that they've been exposing other users. So this is what I mean by framing, right? So Fidelity creates the illusion of finality. It sounds very fancy. And, you know, so yeah, if you don't understand what you're creating, just be mindful of like, where you're putting it out there and how you're framing it and what you use it for. So my rule of thumb for this is this, just like make sure you contextualize your outputs, keep them focused also, like make sure you set clear boundaries and expectations, and keep it focused. So sometimes it's best not to show everything, and just because you're able to do this super complex thing, because you can, just resist the urge sometimes, and sometimes it's better to pare back. It's like a mini, tiny MVP experience, you know, where you're just kind of in half an hour, you can actually make a super complex thing and take another hour to kind of tone it down, and you'll get better results anyways. And yeah, so the question is, if it's not helping with the conversation, like, should it be here, right? Because you can't tell people, oh, just ignore that. Like, people don't ignore that. The second rule of thumb is that you should treat generated outputs like you would a sketch. So if you think about these outputs as sketches, even though they look super final, they're a sketch. That makes it a lot easier to have this conversation, right? So a sketch is something that can be fully accepted. It can be just a conversation starter, or it can be something that you just ditch completely. So just think about it as a sketch, just a very high fidelity sketch. And you know, there's no obligation to continue just because I made a sketch, right? The same path. It's just a conversation piece. And finally, you know, what I said earlier, which I truly believe that for communication, anything goes. I'm truly, like, I know when I said the thing about my PM in the beginning, a lot of people cringed, but I think it's really awesome that he did that. He's not here, but, you know, he knows that I appreciate it. And yeah, I think everybody from any discipline should be generating things outside the discipline. They should be generating design to communicate points, but we just have to always remember that it's just a sketch. And yeah, finally share the goodness. You know, it's really, I think that's something that we are doing really well here at Oaks Lab, which is we are actually creating this type of library and sharing like our experiences, what's working, what's not working, talking every week. You know, the whole team grows at once when we do that, and like this really kind of one thing that I really notice is that we all face similar problems across teams, across disciplines, because the tools have several things which work in similar ways. So I would encourage experimentation, failure in a safe context, and like the curiosity happens when you're actually trying things out, but it's good to try things out in a safe place, because that will also help you to know when you face a situation in a project where you can actually fit in that thing, you'll be better off than trying to do it in that project sometimes, because it's a lot of pressure. So kind of have fun with it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. In conclusion.
What we actually want to say here is, like, before you use AI at any point or anything, just try to firstly answer these 3 questions. So, what problem am I solving? You have to first understand what the outcome you want to achieve with that, like what you're going to get from this. The second question is, am I augmenting or automating? Based on this, you can keep track of what you're achieving. The last one is, how do I frame this output? So, set the proper expectations, set the proper goals. Try to define what you're trying to communicate, what you're trying to prototype or produce. As Nando already said, like, treat all the outputs that you get as sketches.
So I'm going to give you an update on my emotions, because I know you're all very curious. My feelings about AI are still mixed, of course, and you know, the way things are going, the way they're fast with all this AGI talk, who knows where we'll be in 2 years, what kind of world this will be, I don't know. And at the same time, I feel like this reflection really helped me to kind of realize why I love creating with AI, and I feel like it has to do with treating it as a tool. And I know this sounds kind of obvious, but when you think about it, that also gives you another point of view, which is like, if this is a tool, then it doesn't mean that I have to lose my humanity to use it. Actually, that's what humans do. They have tools usually, right? That's it's part of the evolution thing. And yeah, of course, there's still a little bit of that existential dread, but you know, we're all there, right? It's 15% is a pretty good number. And for now, you know, we're having fun with it, we're enjoying it. That's me again in a year. Thank you.